Welcome back to our continuing coverage regarding the attempted assassination of President Trump. And keep it right here on Newsmax. Coming up at 2, we'll also be having our very own Rob Finnerty as well as Charlotte McBride for more special coverage. Keep it right here on Newsmax for continuing coverage. Also, President Biden is expected to speak shortly, so keep it right here. Locked in. Newsmax, we will follow all the late breaking events as the more details coming in. Now, back here to New York City, Midtown, the NYPD is taking the assassination attempt very seriously. Security is up all across the city, especially at places tied to President Trump. Newsmax's Sarah Williamson is nearby at Trump Tower with the very latest. Sarah?
Hey Lydia, yeah, that's right. We've seen the law enforcement here outside Trump Tower, which is always a very heavy police presence, but they've really ramped things up just within the last half an hour or so. I just saw them unfolding another layer of barricades surrounding Trump Tower. There's been a huge number of people that have come here today sporadically throughout the day, gathering, waving their flags, chanting, showing messages of support for the former president. And unlike any other time that there's been a big media presence here, we're not seeing any counter-protesters, because this time it was different. This was a really serious issue that the whole country really seems to be standing behind, Democrats too, and that's what we really have seen in such a deep blue area like Manhattan. But I wanted to give you a quick update, Lydia, on the poor victim of yesterday's attack. The man who was killed has now been identified as former fire chief of Buffalo, 50-year-old Corey Compratore. Now, he's being remembered a hero all over social media now, and the people around him who saw the killing of him right there on the scene said that he died whilst shielding his wife and other girls in the crowd from those bullets. So terrible situation there, but we can be glad that he's in our thoughts, and he went with such honor, protecting his wife and his children and other women in the crowd there from that attack. But here outside, you mentioned Trump isn't here. He is over in New Jersey as he's preparing for the RNC tomorrow in Milwaukee, but there is a huge police presence with a huge crowd as well. Let's take a listen to some of those people that I had a chance to interview yesterday and what really brought them out here today.
I have 24 years in emergency service. Yesterday I was enjoying a beautiful day with my family in this safe environment that we call America. And for that act of terrorism to occur in this political climate, that is nothing but dividing and causing hate and riots. We don't know what's going to happen next. I have no idea what's going to happen next. So I organized this event today, this anti-violence democracy ride, where we will gather, hopefully other like-minded individuals will gather to express their feelings and to relieve some of the stress and what's occurring now politically, nationally, on an international level, hopefully to try to get some answers to why is this happening, why are we allowing it, what can we do to improve, what can we do to move on, what can we do as a just society to correct these consistent issues that are being allowed here, publicly generated on social media, on the news. The rhetoric is being directed at common sense and values.
I have said, and I'll say again, we are under siege. And just as the Bible expresses itself, that in the last days Satan will come down in great wrath, because it or he, whichever way you want to express it, knoweth that his time is short. Whenever the church society and the so-called corporate church society basically turn their back on righteousness and holiness for the past 30 plus years, this is what you get. You get people like devil worshippers and other occult leaders all over the country that now stand up and stand under the umbrella of Christianity and say, well, this is what we believe. And of course, according to our Constitution, that's what the Constitution says. Freedom of religion. Freedom of speech. But who in God's name would have thought, while our ancestors was sitting down writing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, who in God's name would have thought that we would have been inundated by evil over here to the point that now people rather worship a disgraceful being than they would a respectful being? And whenever it comes to hate mongering, whenever it comes to anti-Semitism, this is just a broad perspective with another brush that's painting it in a different direction towards people that's full of hostility and violence, savagery, trying to take out a prior president of the United States. It has reached the level right now, and I want to just emphasize that I thank God every minute that Donald Trump did not die. And it's more to it than just his death, in which one person's death, I don't care who you are, the spectators that was there, they was talking about that that firefighter, that captain or whoever it was, there's like 2 dead, in addition to the idiot that wound up trying to kill the president. But let's just look at things from a broader perspective for a second. If Donald J. Trump would have died under the hand of an assailant pertaining to an assassination, that in and of itself could have unleashed hell here up into America to the degree that we'd have basically started the format of civil war. And of course, the leader that's in charge of the bigger bombs and the bigger airplanes and the tanks and everything else, he would have basically had to have ordered for martial law if it would have got out of hand that way. And then that would have created another problem that would have created even more problems. If people cannot realize how close we are right now to the edge of falling off, then obviously they're either asleep or they're the ones that are pushing society towards falling off the cliff. Because I said yesterday, and I still agree to it, society, as a rule, is going to survive either as a civilized society or it will survive as a uncivilized society. Society will survive in one or the other venues. What these evil demonic spirits are doing, they are trying to drive our civilized society off into an uncivilized society. That way we'll basically take out ourselves. Now, I brought this up in many other different videos, and fortunately yesterday I was watching the occurrences take place live as they was unfolding. And I knew that if that bullet would have been basically about a half an inch, 1/2 inch closer, it would have basically went through Donald Trump's head, and we would now be looking at a martyr versus a prior president and a potential future president. If this does anything, I hope to God that it will awaken the American people towards the seriousness of all this, because whenever you're talking about the president of the United States or a prior president of the United States, it's nothing to be gawked at, it's nothing to be laughed at, it's nothing to be made fun of, it's nothing on Saturday Night Live, the way that they kick around towards acting like everything's just a joke and some sort of playwright. America needs to awaken before America winds up in a bloodbath. Because whenever we get to looking at all these starvations and all these other miseries that's going on, not just over in the Middle East, but in all these other different countries, America has been blessed tremendously. And if you don't think that this blessing can be taken from us, you got another thought coming to you, buddy. Because if we think that we're invincible, and that we can't be taken down, especially if we're no longer participating in worshiping a holy, righteous God. Well, you just hang around and see. Coming near a neighborhood near you. Now, I've already seen part of this. There's another part coming on pertaining to the Kennedys that I really want you to watch. That I absolutely found it to be outstandingly spooky to the degree of what he was talking about and the emotions that he's facing off on right now towards looking at the past pertaining to what he's already went through pertaining to prior family members. And one of those family members was, in fact, a president of the United States.
I think, Lydia, that gentleman really sums it up perfectly there and eloquently about the questions that have been really on everybody's lips since that yesterday. How do we move forward from there? How does the country come together? And how does the political system, the political divide here recover from such an instance? But, you know, we are moving forward from this with the RNC ahead of us. It'll be interesting to see how the former president reacts to this and how the rest of the Republicans this week and the Democrats with the DNC coming up as well, how they react to yesterday's events as well, Lydia.
Sarah Williamson, thank you so much for that report. All right, President Trump is recovering again after a failed assassination attempt on his life. We'll never forget this historic weekend. But for the people at that Pennsylvania rally, the shock has just, it's still there. I can't even imagine how emotional they may be. I barely slept last night watching the events unfold and all the adrenaline pumping, never mind somebody who was actually there. Here with us now, talking to us about his experiences, Joshua Minsky, Vice President of the University of Pittsburgh College Republicans. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Joshua, so talk to me about your proximity to everything that went down.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're all in the crowd, in the audience, right? And my friend and I were both volunteering at the event. I'm working as a Trump force captain on the campaign. And when the shots ring out, obviously no one really expects there to actually be a shooting. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, a shooting at a Trump rally, but it actually was real. And so once everyone realized what was going on, we all got on the ground. Where I was standing just happened to be in the line of fire, so a man just a few feet away from me was...
See, and I think that's where these satanic evil spirits are tricking humanity, is that they're coming at us with ideals or feelings that this can't be happening. This isn't real. In other words, it's unbelievable. The thing about it is, your unbelievable becomes believable, especially after it occurs. After it occurs, then it's too late. Other than to sweep up the mess, pick up all the glass, mop up all the blood, and maybe we're smart enough that we can rebuild over again, providing that there's enough of us to rebuild over again. We are in a trajectory right now of absolutely doom and gloom. And these evil demonic spirits are sitting back and they're trying to trick us, they're trying to deceive us, they're trying to manipulate us, they're trying to get us to turn against one another, they're trying to divide us, division, cause all kinds of problems with our families. I mean, the divorce rate right now is higher than I think it's ever been. The bankruptcy is higher right now than it's ever been. We are living in a state of affairs right now that is so uncertain. I'm almost as scared to go to bed at night and wake back up and turn back on the news, because I have no earthly ideal in what that I'm going to have to embrace or accept as it being reality, even though the night before it didn't exist. That is how close, my friends, that we are on the edge of no longer participating as a civilized society. Because like I said, a society is a society, and it don't matter if it's on this continent or on the other 6 continents all over the world. Once a society reaches the point that it's no longer a civilized society, then it goes automatically over into a uncivilized society. Once you get over into a uncivilized society, then you're basically talking about a Wild Wild West show. That's basically what the Pilgrims and the people over in Europe was trying to do by coming over here to America and taming the land. There was a lot of hostility because the Pilgrims was doing it in the wrong way, and they created violence, and in their violence there was more violence that led to even more violence that basically turned into what it turned into. And basically it was the king that took over the country because of all the violence, and it wasn't until 1776 that the people over here realized that what we was doing, we was being susceptible to a rule that we didn't want. And because of it, our ancestors stood up against that and said, enough is enough. We're no longer got to take this. In other words, society had become imprisoned pertaining to somebody else's rule. That's whenever our ancestors tipped over the Tea Party, and that's whenever it was on like Donkey Kong. Now, we're very close right now of losing our freedoms. We're very close right now of getting to the point that we can't even go out on the street. We can't even go to a public event. We can't even go to church. We can't even go to a bowling alley. We can't even go to any other type of outdoor arena in having to worry about our own personal lives. I mean, the weekend of the 4th of July, there was over 100 people that got injured, and I think about 30 of them was dead up in Chicago alone. Now, I realize Chicago's a big place, right? But that's happening all over the world. It's not happening nearly as bad as what it is in Chicago, but it's happening all over the United States pertaining to gun violence. If Donald J. Trump would have gotten assassinated yesterday, that would have led off into a spree of violence such as America has not seen since basically the Civil Rights Movement. That's how close we are of losing this. And of course, once that fire ever gets out of control and it starts burning, sometimes it takes a long, long time to get it to put out. Depending upon people's attitudes, depending upon how much people has already sacrificed, pertaining to how much hurting that people's already went through. And I got news for society right now pertaining to our politicians that I pray for every day. I pray for every day. Whenever society gets to the point that they're tired of it, and the bills are stacking up, and they don't know if they're going to be able to maintain and keep what they got without somebody coming and jerking it out from underneath them, whenever society gets enough of that, they'll stand up against the rulers, the dictators that are supposed to be in charge. And you know, we was led to believe whenever the internet come on board that this is one of the tools that we can use for our authority figures to keep us safe. Well, we see now that we was tricked, because when it comes to safety, our streets right now are more unsafe than what it was before the internet ever come on board. And when it comes to privacy, I got news for you. You don't have no privacy. I was thinking about this because I had to go get an x-ray done last week. It was Tuesday. I got an x-ray done, and I'm already getting bills from the Weakley County hospital up here in Weakley County, Martin, Tennessee, pertaining to an x-ray that was done, over $1,000, that supposedly I was under the influence that my insurance was paying for, because I don't have $1,000. And even to this day, they still don't know what's causing the infection. They know that it's an infection. Well, you don't have to be a scientist to figure out if the man didn't have an infection before he had the operation of putting the hardware in his leg, and now he's got an infection in his leg. Sounds to me like you got a hardware infection. But now to actually be able to prove that, to build a case on that. That way you can go back to the doctor that put that hardware in and say, hey buddy, you need to take this hardware out. It's almost like pulling hen's teeth. I have been suffering now for 6 months with an open wound over me being operated on and having my left ankle fused. The bones has already healed up. The fuser, the fuse on the fuser operation worked perfectly. But now I've got a side wound on the side of my leg that keeps oozing, probably about the size of a nickel or size of a quarter. And they keep telling me, well, you don't want that to heal up first because we got to first take care of the problem on the inside of the leg before we heal up the problem on the outside of the leg. So I'm stuck in between a hard place and a rock, and whenever the people that's working on me up there in Martin, Tennessee, pertaining to the center up there, tell me, well, now we've already got this approved by the insurance company, and then all of a sudden I get a statement less than 3 days later that I owe over $1,000. That's frightening. That's frightening to people like me because I'm barely hanging on to what I'm hanging on to right now. You don't see me out here driving new vehicles. You don't see me out here driving luxury stuff. I'm living in a 2015 RV right here, and the other RV that I was living in before I started living in this one was a 2000 model. That's a 24-year-old RV that I was living in, which I'm not going to complain because I'd much rather live in an RV than I would an 8x8 prison cell. But this attack upon a society is not just an attack upon the one or two people. This is an attack upon all of us right here in the United States. And if we don't awaken to it, I'm just afraid that once we go over the Rubicon, there won't be no returning back. In other words, we'll have reached a pinnacle point in our lives pertaining to a society that was adjusted towards being a civilized society to now we're basically living as an uncivilized society. And whenever you get to looking at the facts pertaining to all the gun violence that happened up in Chicago and all the other gun violence going on all over the world, we're at the brink of being a uncivilized society operating under that format. I mean, whenever people in Arizona, this was whenever I was out in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been out there now 3 different times, but whenever I was out there was basically whenever that senator or congressman or whoever that it was got shot, and I wasn't even allowed to go back to the church that I was a member of because of all the gossip that's been gossiped about me. Basically, it was an FBI agent and two different officials along with the administrator that come out to the parking lot and said, look, you just need to turn around and go back. You're no longer welcome here, Mr. Jackson. And I had been going to that church for over 6 months, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and Sunday night. Similar towards what went on in my life over here in Central Baptist Church. Whenever I come back to Weakley County in 2014, I had to find a church somewhere. So I finally found a church that I felt satisfied in. And Randy Brundridge, once more, going off of a bunch of gossip, brought 3 police officers in 3 different cars to have me escorted off the property, even though there had never been an incident in my life on that property or with any of the members that goes to that church. That's what's happening to the good people. And of course, all I can do is sit back and record and speak my piece like I am right now, and hopefully somebody out there will hear me. And if not, we're going to continue to go further and further down this rat hole that once we get down to the bottom of it, I guarantee you we're not going to like what we're going to see.
I was hit by a bullet and he died. So
let's back up a little bit. Let's get all this guy's testimony. I'm sorry about that. Right there.
And my friend and I were both volunteering at the event. I'm working as a Trump force captain on the campaign. And when the shots ring out, obviously no one really expects there to actually be a shooting. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, a shooting at a Trump rally, but it actually was real. And so once everyone realized what was going on, we all got on the ground. Where I was standing just happened to be in the line of fire, so a man just a few feet away from me was hit by a bullet, and he died. So
That
the
firefighter that we were talking about before, and he died a hero. He was a hero while he was alive. There he is. He was a hero as a fire chief, and then he dies a hero protecting women, protecting his family.
Absolutely.
How old are you, by the way, Joshua?
I'm 21.
21. To come so close to death, to be so young, because all it would have taken is that sniper, the killer, to move ever so slightly, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now. How do you feel at this moment?
It's interesting, right? Like, you never really think about death until it comes knocking at your door, right? But I guess that there's a reason for everything, and I guess hopefully I live for a reason, and I'm just glad to be alive. I'm very, very happy. It really does show in my mind when I'm sitting on the ground, like, how are we in a state in this country where this type of political violence can even happen? It just shows how divided we are as a nation. Hopefully this is a wake-up call.
Nothing is sacred.
I hope it is indeed a wake-up call. I can only imagine how much your mom must have hugged you, seeing you safe.
We was lied to pertaining to if we bring on the internet with all this smartphone technology, that our lives will be better and that our environment will be safer. We have made a mistake. And until we take control of these things that are controlling these things, we're only going to continue to spiral down a dirty, rotten, bloody, dark rat hole. And that's what Lucifer and these evil demonic spirits that is set up shop over here in America, that's what they want to do. That's exactly what they want to do. They want to bring not only themselves to the point of destruction, but they want to bring society to the point of destruction. And if people can't see that after this major event has taken place, then they're either blind in one eye and can't see out of the other, or they just don't care to begin with. And instead of them being part of the solution to the problem, they are the problem.
She was quite worried. Yeah, we had no internet for 30 minutes after the event, so because we were in the middle of Pennsylvania, so I couldn't contact anyone, so I could not even imagine.
My nephew Tommy's your age, so I can only imagine. I have a daughter myself, and you're my nephew Tommy's age, so I just thank God you're okay. Thank God you're okay, and all we can do is pray for our nation, pray for our president, and pray for those families who have been devastated. All right, Joshua Minsky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll have much more on the attempted assassination of President Trump when we return. Coverage continues beginning at 2 p.m. Eastern with hosts Rob Finnerty and Charlotte McBride. Also, when we return, we'll hear from presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his very personal connection to what happened to President Trump.
It's as if society has become calloused, and every time we hear of a gun shooting, every time we hear something horrible happening, we'll look at one another and we'll say, oh well, another one bites the dust, kind of like that song. Remember that song a long time ago by Kansas? Another one bites the dust. I think it was by Kansas. We have become lax to this violence, and that was one of the primary reasons why that my brother and I wanted to build a shelter out here to rehabilitate our military and our men and women in uniform, and to put up a memorial out here in honoring those who have died because of the very reason that we're talking about right now. Like I said, if that bullet would have been, you figure, on the guy on the other end of the barrel, the man that got killed because he was trying to kill prior President Trump, and did kill two other individuals. I think he killed two. One of them is just barely hanging on with his life. If he would have moved that gun barrel half of the thickness of a hair, which I don't know for sure exactly how much that would be. That would probably be like a micromillimeter or centimeter over to one side a little bit. That would have been enough to have lodged a bullet in a prior president running President Trump's head. That could have very well started total anarchy here in the land. Because that is how close we are of this fire basically erupting. And once it erupts, I don't even know that martial law would be able to put it out all at once. And of course, all that's going to do is make people that is in control, that's going to make them look that much more brutal, because they had to use brutal tactics just to be able to maintain order here in the land. I've never seen things like it is right now. I really haven't. I'm 63 years old, and I've never seen it like it is right now. Of course, I'm not really old enough to remember the civil rights movement, that I'm sure in one level was probably just as serious as what it is right now. I was not old enough to remember the assassination of Kennedy, but that's what they're fixing to talk about right here, pertaining to his uncle and his dad that got killed. Please listen.
Breaking news, we are now learning that explosive devices were found inside the car of the 20-year-old man who attempted to assassinate former President Trump during his rally. This according to the Wall Street Journal. That suspect, Thomas Matthew Crook's car, was found not far from the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Again, explosives were found in the gunman's car. We'll continue to monitor this situation as more details come in regarding the attempted assassination of President Trump. Meantime, there's some people that have an all too familiar connection to what happened to President Trump. More than just a candidate in this election, Robert Kennedy Jr., clearly with a personal connection to last night's horrific events. Both his uncle, President John F. Kennedy, and his father, Robert F. Kennedy, were gunned down when he was just a child, and now as a candidate. Kennedy has asked for Secret Service protection and has so far been denied. Last night, Greg Kelly and Katrina Zish spoke with the presidential candidate to get his thoughts on this heinous act.
My thoughts are that it's time for us all every American, to take a step back, take a breath, to understand that this moment that we're all complicit in it. That all of us who fed into the vitriol, the hatred, the anger, and this is the ultimate culmination of that, and we need to all step back and start seeing each other once again as Americans, as part of a community, understand that America is better than this, and we now have the exemplary nation again, and that we need to come together in a spirit of love, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, and let's start healing our country again and use this terrible, terrible event to start unifying again, and of course to pray in this moment for President Trump and for his family, who are all going through an ordeal with which I'm very familiar.
Mr. Kennedy, when you witnessed that moment, I can only imagine what you felt personally, again, as Greg referenced, based on...
I'm pretty sure a whole flood of memories, a whole flood of feelings come back to him that was extremely frightful during the time that he went through all that. Part of that post-traumatic stress disorder that he finally got over. But whenever something like this happens, it's a flashback. Boom, bam, wow. I didn't even know that was still back there. Oh yeah, those ideals and those feelings, they're still there. Those memories are still there. I just imagine he had a flashback.
And the history with your family. Also, you have been asking for your own Secret Service protection, which you have been denied. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make this moment about me, but I was with my dad when he died. Of course, I was very, very, I lived through my uncle's assassination in 1963 when I was 10 years old, and then I was 14 when my dad was killed. And I was with him in Los Angeles, and so I understand what the family is going through. I also understand the greater trauma to our country, that this affects everybody in our country. And we have to understand again that and it's linked in one way or another to the vitriol, to the anger, to the disunity that
It's not only a spirit of disunity, but it's a spirit of destruction. Because we went through COVID, a lot of people had to basically retire early, or maybe take a lot of their 401k and use it up because the money flow wasn't no longer there. And then to top it off, here come the oil industries that jacked up all the oil, that's basically had a big fluctuation in driving up our inflation to where now whenever you go to the grocery store, you're going to spend at least a third more for the exact same things that you was eating prior to COVID. You're going to spend at least a third more on a dollar bill sum, on a monetary sum, than you was before. I'll put it. I got an example, and I want to use it. That's a pure example. I've got this big round thing that you use towards standing outside, especially in the fall, and you throw maybe about 7-8 pieces of logs in there, and you can strike it up. It's like a fire ring, but this one is a nice one. It's got like an edge around it, and it's got another thing that you can put on top of it. That way you can fry your hamburgers or hot dogs or keep them warm or whatever. I had to move it the other day. And I got to looking. I paid $67 for it. $67 for it before COVID. That same item up the road 10 miles from here in the same business that I originally purchased it at, Royal King, now costs over $200. You have went from $67 to over $200 in about a 4-year period. And that's just one illustration. You can look at your automobiles, you can look at the parts, you can look at your wood supplies toward being able to build a house and all the rinky-dinks that goes along with it, all your little knobs and everything that you put on all your cabinetry and stuff that used to only be 60 cents a knob. Now it's $2.60 a knob. A faucet that you could buy, a good decent faucet for less than $100, that same rinky-dink faucet today will cost you over $100. Don't even think about buying a good faucet, because if you buy a good faucet, you're looking at probably $200, $300, maybe $400 for a real good state-of-the-art faucet. So the quality of our life has been diminished significantly. And we have tried to cover it up. We've tried to act like that it wasn't a big deal, even though we lost over 1 million people during COVID. But whenever OPEC done what they done, right either in the center or the latter part of people trying to get over COVID, in jacking up the oil prices the way that they did, it has caused chaos all over the world. And that's the reason why I continue to say that those people need to go to jail. They need to go to jail for doing that, pertaining to gouging the public. And they need to go to jail because these was the people that knowed what they was doing to planet Earth, and they kept doing it anyway. And the individual over in Saudi Arabia that masterminded 9/11 and killed that journalist, they don't need to go to jail. They need to go to hell. They need to be eradicated from the planet Earth, because they are the ones that are manifesting all this stuff all over the planet. And they're basically wanting to drive us off into a state of total destruction. And if we don't watch, if we take the bait, like other generations before us, and you have to look at the Civil War here in America, towards basically, they took the bait, and the next thing you know, it went from a argument to a knockdown drag out, from a knockdown drag out to an all-out and out war. That's what this thing is wanting us to do. It is wanting us to become our worst enemy and our worst nightmare. And if we don't watch, we're going to take the bait. And we're going to be right in the same situations that our ancestors was, that we was supposed to have been smart enough to have read through the lines and figured out, well, that's the reason why they couldn't stop it, or that's the reason why it went on as long as it did, was because nobody was willing to reason. Nobody was willing to look at the facts. Nobody was willing to compromise.
Many of us contributed to. And, you know, when my uncle died, it was at a time of great division as well. When my uncle landed in Dallas in November 22nd, 1963, there were posters all around Dallas that said, wanted dead or alive. And they,
now see, whenever he said that, I had no idea that was the case. I mean, I was not old enough to tangibly, physically remember the assassination of JFK, even though I was here. I was only like 2 or 3 years old whenever it occurred. I was born in 1961. I didn't realize that was that much division in our country, that there was actual posters wanted dead or alive. Well, that pretty well tells me the tale in what was going on during those major events that led up to his assassination. Chaos, division, people not getting along. I mean, if you're bold enough to start putting up signs, wanted dead or alive, pretending to your leader of your country, your chief and commander, something is wrong that somebody didn't tell you to tear that sign down or punish you for putting that sign up to begin with. Something is wrong, terribly wrong, that has caused that type of division. Now, I don't know if it was the Kennedy family that caused it. I don't know if it was what went on up here in Kentucky pertaining to booting everybody off of a piece of property over here. I don't know what the deal was, but whatever it was, it must have been bad enough that it caused a great division. It caused a great divide. And it's really, really sad in the things that has occurred. I said I was 3 years old. I was actually 7 years old whenever the assassination of Kennedy took place. Kennedy's assassination took place in 1968, I think.
Newspapers were printing very, very poisonous articles about him, and his...
I think he was talking about his dad being assassinated before that.
In some ways, was linked to that wave of hatred, and the same was true with my dad. My dad was running in 1968, which was the most polarized divisive time in American history since the American Civil War. You know, there was terrible anger on both sides, on all sides. And part of the eruption of that anger was not only the riots we were seeing in the cities that year, but we also saw Martin Luther King's assassination that year. And then 2 months later, my father's assassination, and all of it is connected.
And once more, it brought a flood, a flashback of memories into his mind, into his heart, in seeing where prior President Trump come within centimeters. Half the thickness of a hair is all it would have taken for that gun barrel to have moved one way or the other, that could have made all the differences between life and death in being either injured or not being injured or dying. The thickness of a hair. That's how close we are right now with society of falling off the cliff, of no longer operating as a civilized society, but operating as a uncivilized society. Who do you think is driving this? Who do you think is manufacturing this or manifesting this? These demons, these evil demonic spirits, that it would tickle them all to death if they could drive humanity off into a state of destruction, because that's the very thing that they drove themselves off into whenever they decided to challenge the kingdom of God. Whenever they challenged the kingdom of God, they sealed their own doom pertaining to them being kicked out of heaven. Now, are we going to fall for the same bait? That's the $64,000 question. Are we as a society going to fall for the same bait? The same as our ancestors has done, the same as other cultures and other generations has done towards using basically violence and bloodshed for a reason to regain, for a reason to repopulate, for a reason to bring destruction into our own lives. That way the younger generation will be able to build it back. Is that what we're going to do? Is that what all this is about?
And it's connected to each of us, and each of us needs to take responsibility for our own behavior. And hopefully, we can make something good of this. We can take that moment between our impulse and our action to, when we're angry at somebody, when we want to amplify a post of clever piece of hatred, that we just say we're not going to do that right now. We're gonna try to nurture love. We're going to try to nurture forgiveness. We're going to try to nurture a sense of community and a sense of harmony among Americans. We can have a debate, just like you have a debate among our family members, without hating them. We need to stop saying that the other guy is going to be with the Republic. Because, there are a lot of crazy people in this country, and when you do that, when you use that extreme kind of language, you're giving permission to those kind of people to engage in this kind of action. That would be my message to people.
I have a question for you, though. You were looking for Secret Service protection a few months ago. I believe the Biden administration would not grant you Secret Service protection. Has there been a change? And given the events of today, sir, your situation is an urgent one.
I don't want to make this about me. I think we need to focus on larger issues. There's a lot more important issues than that debate within the administration. I think we should all take an example of how the Secret Service behaved here. We all saw them, the men and women who ran toward the bullet fire, who circled the president, who put their own lives at risk, who were willing to take a bullet, not just for the President of the United States, the former President, but also for our constitutional system of government, for our Constitution, and for our country. And I think all of us should take inspiration from that example and understand that we have to take risks, we have to make sacrifices, and those sacrifices may not be putting yourself in the path of a bullet, but instead, biting your tongue when you want to say something ugly to somebody or something hateful, and taking a couple of breaths and maybe saying something kind instead and something healing instead.
All right, the power of prayer, how a nation can heal after yesterday's tragic event. Next.
Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, millions of Americans are tuning into Newsmax, and a new
Guess that's kind of like a commercial. Anyways, it's really bad in seeing things go from bad to worse, and don't think that we can't go from a worse state to a worser state, because we can. And to sit back and basically
Photo.
What would be the right word? What would be the right word I'm looking for here? To sit back.
And that.
To sit back and watch as a spectator how things has went in the past pertaining to our culture and generations before us, and to sit back and watch it now basically go down the same trail, the same steps, and we're not willing to awaken to these problems in identifying who the perpetrator is that's stirring all this stuff up, then that just tells me that we are, as the Bible talks about, the blind leading the blind, that if the blind lead the blind, then they both shall leadeth off into the ditch. Now, I have tried desperately, and I do mean desperately, in trying to rally the people around peace and utopia and love pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy coming true. Obviously, there was enough of the critics out there that fed a bunch of BS to all the other people that misled them to the degree that, well, we're not going to listen to this guy. This guy don't know what he's talking about. There is proof now that is surfacing about the very fundamental things that I've been talking about in regards towards Al-Qaeda was not the primary people that done what they done in killing almost 3,000 people the day of 9/11. It goes right back to your oil fields. It goes right back to the Saudi territory. And I still think what Mr. Old Man Bush done after he become president on the coattail of Reagan towards doing what he done to Iraq pertaining to Saddam Hussein, in which there's no doubt Saddam Hussein was a ruthless dictator. But whenever they went over there supposedly to bring stability to that region, we didn't bring stability to that region. If anything, we brought more of a instability to that region after we took down Saddam Hussein. The same way as what went on in Afghanistan. You cannot conform a group of people from the outside in. You have to allow for the Holy Spirit to work on them people from the inside out. That is the only way that you're going to conform anybody. And it's not that you yourself have the power to conform. It's only that God is using you as a tool to be a conformer or a liberator. What this individual on TV needed, he needed counseling. He needed prayer. He needed deliverance from whatever was going on in his reprobate heart and his reprobate mind, for anybody to take up arms and have the gall to point his deadly rifle at a prior United States president, not either understanding the consequences or had convinced himself that there was not going to be no consequences. Why would anybody think that? Because of our lax judges and our lax attorneys and our lax laws. That guy right there, the devil working through him, could have very well started a civil war in America. And I want people to burn that image in their minds of an individual that, yes, he was bullied growing up. I've already heard about some of the horror stories. He probably had a broken home growing up, but still, that does not give nobody the right to go out here and project their anger of the things that they was disappointed in growing up. He's 20 years old, and take it out on the general public, and at least take it out on our prior chief and commander. Sick. Now, your psychiatric community would have found somebody like this, and they'd start feeding him with a bunch of pills. They would have basically converted him over, medically speaking, to the point that he wouldn't have been able to have had enough strength or enough sense to have known how to do anything like that. Well, that's one way to conquer the problem, isn't it? Just seduce everybody medically with all these chemicals. But what we're supposed to do as Christians, born again believing Christians, because at one time we needed converting. At one time we needed deliverance. At one time we was living in sin.